Welcome to the Bring Me to Life podcast. Here are your hosts, CeeLo Mon and Shannon Shine.
Hi everybody, thank you for joining us for Season 3 of Project Bring Me to Life. We're glad that you decided to wake up and shine on with us this evening. I'm here with CeeLo Mon, and I am Shane.
Hello everybody. It's crazy that Season 3 is starting, and I'm very excited because we have a lot of new updates on our website, the podcast in general. We have a lot of new interviews, and especially this one, I'm really excited.
Yeah, this one's amazing with Laura Magdalene Eisenhower.
Yep. Yeah, and Laura, she talks a lot about exopolitics, which is the main focus of this interview specifically. We touch on things like Dwight D. Eisenhower meeting with ETs, and a lot of really far out there things that I think a lot of people would be interested in hearing.
For sure. I learned a lot from this interview, and I hope you do too. So stay tuned, and don't forget to share us with your favorite social media. So stay awake and shine on.
Welcome to Project Bring Me to Life. Bringing to life the conscious arts. Giving a voice to spirituality. Covering art, music, metaphysics, and holistic health.
Looking for messages from your spirit guides, ancestors, and/or ascended masters? Need help understanding more about twin flames? Introducing Patrizia Luna. She's a psychic, medium, master Reiki healer, and spiritual coach with over 20 years of experience. She does angel moon rituals, tarot and oracle readings. She has direct communication with angels, ascended masters, and the ancestors. Discover your gifts and open doors to your spiritual path. Contact her today via email at patriziabezil04@yahoo.ca and on Instagram at patrizia_luna.
All right, and welcome back to the show, everybody. Here we are with Laura Eisenhower. Welcome to the show.
Well, thank you so much for having me. Good to be here.
Yeah, it's definitely a pleasure, and as soon as I posted on Facebook that we were going to interview you, people freaked out just a little bit. And
really excited.
yeah, we got a lot of questions that we'll get to later, but I think first, just tell us, I guess, a little introductory to about you and what you do.
Wow. Okay. I'm definitely like a researcher. And I research a lot to sort of help explain a lot of my experiences throughout life. And, I have sort of an inner story going on and a lot of, viewpoints, about our galactic history and about what's going on in the world, behind the scenes. And my experiences have helped me to, really have an open mind to certain things that aren't maybe easy for others to grasp. And so I connect a lot of dots, and I share my findings and my research as I also share my life experience and some of the things that I've gone through and my deeper soul journey type stuff. I'm an international speaker, and so I present that material. I also do session work. I'm an astrologist. I'm a tarot reader. I do clairvoyant sessions as my day job. And I actually bring in a lot that I learned from my clients, because we all hold these incredible stories, and so much gets proven to me every day, or at least brings me into a knowingness that's beyond a reasonable doubt. That's enough for me to be able to share and feel pretty confident about what I'm sharing, just because there's so many common threads that link people's stories together when it relates to extraterrestrials and stuff like that. So yeah, I'm a researcher. I call myself a global alchemist. I'm really trying to, I'm not trying, I'm going to, and I am, just like we all are. I like to empower this in people, is that we're turning the lead of this human experience into gold. And the more we recognize our role, the more conscious we can be of the things that need that massive transformation and change.
Wow. Love that. Yeah, that's absolutely beautiful. That's amazing. Yeah, so I think pretty much something that is something I would really like to talk about, and something I wanted to reach out to you about is exopolitics. it's something that we haven't talked about on the podcast, and something I think is really super important. And I've seen a few interviews that you did with Alfred Weber, and, Dr. Stephen Greer is doing really great stuff, and you're doing great stuff. And so I think it's really important for people all over to understand what this term means and what it's all about. So could you please tell us, give us a little introductory about what exopolitics is?
Well, it's definitely the politics of things that are off planet, off world, but we know that the off planet beings that we're dealing with are interacting with the Earth. There's at least 100 or so species, they've said, that are interacting with, governments, humans. There's a lot of contact experiences people are having. There's a lot of abduction experience, people are having. And so when we look at the concept of exopolitics, we're looking at the broader picture, the larger picture, not just Earth politics. We're talking about exopolitics, which is about what's really out there, what's in this multidimensional cosmos that we're in as far as other life. And what is the politics of that? I mean, we want to be diplomatic. We want to understand the indigenous races on certain, planets. We also want to understand who's interacting with the Earth, what government ET treaties are about, what the so-called negative ET agenda is about, and also the benevolent races. And so I look at it almost like a human body. We deal with disease, we deal with, infiltration and attacks, usually because we're out of balance. And so as a humanity, we've been out of balance, which has made us very susceptible and vulnerable to these lower beings and entities. And it was sort of set up this way anyway, but, we're dealing with, those that help to seed us and also those that are trying to control us. And when this second creation happened, this new Earth energy, 26,000 years ago, dark technologies were put in place that made it very difficult for us to upgrade our DNA. And so it's really important to understand, what the exopolitical factors are that we're dealing with, or else we're not going to really know how to handle our world. We're only going to be trying to work with a certain portion of our experience if we don't open ourselves up to the exopolitical nature of things. And there's positive and negative, just like in humans. But I would say there's way more benevolent. I mean, it's similar to the immune system. It's not going to really work for us unless we step up to the plate. We can't heal if we're not willing to heal. Our immune system's not going to do a whole lot for us if we keep trashing our body. And the benevolent races out there, even though they're already helping, it's going to be difficult for us to really work with them if we're not doing what we need to do within ourselves, and as a humanity. So all these things, help us to understand. Exopolitics as a subject just helps us to understand, what are we really dealing with here? Who's here to help? Who isn't? How are we connected with it? I mean, we have this genetic DNA connection to all extraterrestrial. Well, not all, but like a huge number. It's just interesting when we break apart, who we are as beings, where that infiltration can happen, which is definitely a negative ego construct when we think about governments and ET treaties and things that we've been kept in the dark about. The Mars agenda, for example, that's a huge exopolitical issue. What's going on with that? Why haven't we found, why now? Why are we starting to hear about it now? Well, are we really hearing it in the way that is the truth? And so with a lot of whistleblowers out there and a lot of those speaking the truth, it's interesting because you can put Mars in a Google search and you're going to get the Mars reality show and some of the newer stuff that's kind of diverting people's attention from what's really going on.
Yeah, that's totally interesting and crazy. There's so many people that are like a part of big pieces of society that aren't even thinking about the concept of extraterrestrial life and the different treaties and things like that. Even talking to some of my family members, they asked what my interview was about today, and I tried to explain it to them. And we started out with an awesome conversation about how aliens could be helping us in some ways and how everybody in some sense is likely to be an alien. But then it quickly turned to, well, maybe there's a reason we don't know about them, and maybe there's some, it went into completely hysterical topics so quickly that they didn't even want to see the benefits of communicating and finding out what we're not learning. And there's so many people that just need to be woken up to this, and we love that you're kind of being the whistleblower for it and explaining it to us, and you have all these connections, and we'd love to hear more about the Mars, the whole Mars scenario. And we know that you've had some very interesting incidents with the whole Mars.
That's right. I love it. In 2006, I was recruited. Well, it was an attempted recruitment to take me off planet, and it was done in a, very manipulative way. They used a person as bait. Actually, they used looking glass technologies to locate us in a past life so that I wouldn't just, they can't just stick you with an agent and expect you to fall for them if there isn't some sort of familiarity or affinity. And so they were very strategic in who they targeted to bring into the program long before they showed up to try and pull me in. And they used him. I met him at a festival, and I thought I was just meeting somebody that I had a strong connection with. And upon getting to know him, I found out about the Mars thing, but he said it was very hush-hush. And then all of a sudden it was really about me going. And I was like, well, I don't want to go to Mars. And I thought I could convince him to stay on Earth so that we could take care of our planet and then maybe look at going to Mars. And nobody was giving me the time of day. And I wasn't able to really connect with the people that he was connecting with. He would go to these secret meetings, and he would just tell me about them, but I didn't have direct contact, with these people. I did go to one New Year's Eve party of one of the group members, but they're all connected to the CIA. They're all connected to MJ-12, which are the group within the shadow government that actually have their hands on the alien technology. And they work sort of as advisors, sort of like a think tank that was connected to it. But I discovered, it was much more than just that, and that they were connected to my labs, which are military abductions. When I was with my partner, he was telepathing with some sort of ET race, and I got the feeling that it wasn't even a legitimate race. And so I was like, this is like artificial telepathy, but I had nothing, no Project Camelot, no whistleblowers, nobody to really refer to on all of this. He was just using the term handler for the people he was dealing with, or the one person he was dealing with especially. And I'm like, I've heard this stuff in a movie. I'm like, well, I don't want a handler. He's like, you can have a handler. I'm like, I don't want a handler. I'm like, I don't want to go to Mars. I don't want any of this, It's like, let's put our heads together though and really look at this stuff. I'm not, and the more I was exposed to all this, the more I realized, I am going to be used. They want to use me, and there's no way in hell. And then I found out about 6 months into the relationship after I'd already moved to be with him, because the whole idea sort of went away. And so we could focus more on the relationship. And I think they did that on purpose. And it was enough for me to even think that I was tracked, let alone, having all this monitored. But he told me about 6 months into the relationship that he was sent specifically to this festival to pull me into this project. And they had tried to present it in a way that wasn't intimidating, whatever they tried to do didn't work. And I did a lot of research about the names that he was dealing with. And it took me a while to find a link between them and some of these darker technologies. And it wasn't until a couple of years later that I saw a website about artificial telepathy in my labs and all these things that I was picking up on, because I could tell that something was going on with him. He would get phone calls and disappear for days and not remember where he went. And, it's just like, you just think the movie credits are going to come up at the end of every day. I still feel that way. So it was, really intense. And it helped me to understand, well, what is this Mars agenda? And it seemed like, the original idea was to protect the human genome and, in the event of a cataclysm or human DNA. And that, makes sense. But it still wasn't a position I necessarily wanted unless it became real clear that we really had to do this. But it's like, okay, maybe you can find somebody else, because I was born with a really powerful mission connected to Mother Earth, connected to the stargates and this window period, this ascension window period we're in, which is called a stellar activation cycle. And I've always been getting downloads about what that means. So how the hell am I going to be able to do that on Mars? So it was pretty easy to know that that's what I didn't want. And plus, I don't feel drawn to go to Mars. Maybe later, when we're with Star Family and we're traveling around, but not with, these agents where it's all manipulative. And even though they didn't harm me, when I was pulling out of it, my partner said, well, they're going to kidnap you and take you anyway. And I was like, okay. And I ended up moving down the street. I've been raising 2 kids who are 17 now. They're twins. And, at that tender age of 7 and 8 years old, they're just like, what the heck's going on here? And he would show up and we'd get sick because the energy emanating from his aura was very much, connected to something that was not organic or something that just wasn't right. Or there was a lot of technological intrusion on him as they were targeting him to target us. I'm sure there were others that they targeted, but like, why would they target me to go to Mars? Well, some of it has to do with the Eisenhower lineage and how some of this was set up during his administration. He sort of lost control of all of it, though. He tried to invade Area 51. He wanted all of the UFO and ET information set free, and he wanted to have more of a handle on it. And they basically said that it's out of the president's jurisdiction. The president really just didn't have any power. And even Area 51 is like an Indian reservation, but for ETs. And I know it's hard for people to grasp. I go pretty deep, pretty quick. And for some people, it's like, wow, I'm just trying to get comfortable with the idea that there's even extraterrestrials. But, we got to think about this stuff because, it's when we're voting for presidents, when we're dealing with our governments, we're not just dealing with these surface governments. We're dealing with exopolitics, whether we like it or not. And the more we understand, the better. Not all of these races or these beings that we hear about are legit. Some of them have been cloned. Some of them have, if we think about the down crafts like the Roswell and, some of these beings that they were able to relate to, like Dan Bursch, who was a microbiologist and whistleblower, they had, direct contact with these beings. But most remote viewers said that they were future humanoids coming back and I feel to get their genetic information through abduction in order to save their so-called dying race, which is how they presented it to the governments to appeal for their help. But these treaties supposedly happened way, way before Eisenhower. And so the three-letter organizations had already been infiltrated by this agenda. Most of the Greys are actually trying to break free, and some are under reptilian control. And so, not to scare anybody, we just have to look at it like, look at your own life, look at your own negative ego, look at the way we all run energy. Now look at it on a larger scale. If we're dealing with governments that are corrupt, or there's factions of it where they're hoarding technology or using our tax dollars, where we don't know where that money's going, and they're going into black ops projects and all these different sort of things, we have every right, to explore this. And it doesn't mean that we're going to get it 100% correct, but these things need to be put out on the table so we know what we're dealing with, so we know what we're voting for and what we're making agreements to, and it's very dangerous to vote because in a way you're saying, I agree to this person, guiding my future. And if they're connected to this darker agenda or New World Order or anything that's going to compromise our freedoms, then we better, find out and pull away. And I'm not a fearmonger. I look at it like I'm helping people to understand that your partner's cheating on you. To me, it's no different than finding out that you've been with somebody that's betraying you. And yes, it's scary and it's difficult, but ultimately it leads to liberation so that you can find true love. So what I attempt to do is educate people about what's going on so that we can make informed decisions and we can make agreements with things that actually have real security and that are organic. And that would be Mother Earth and how the stargates and how the planetary body was seated with a 13-dimensional core, how nature is guiding us into this shift, and that our chakra system and our DNA is absolutely connected to it. The more we get wrapped up in the governments or any power structures, the less we're able to integrate the light codes that are coming in, which keeps us from being able to advance ourselves and return to the abilities that we used to have back when we were in these higher, more advanced civilizations.
So that's interesting. I did get a question from somebody that sent in a question from the post that I made. And I guess what you just sort of finished with sort of resonates with that. And her name is Mandy. She was asking about, what was going on September 23rd. I've heard the term Wave X. I know you mentioned something about Ascension Plan B and stuff like that. So what do you think this wave of energy really signifies?
Well, it's funny because it's like Plan B sounds like, the birth control you get at the drugstore. Well, I felt more like this month has been being dunked under the water than being on any ascension wave. It's been not the easiest month, but, we're going through a lot of shedding of layers, and lots of scenarios of our past lives, are showing up to be cleared. And as we move into higher earth energies, we're also moving into energies that we lost contact with. So, for example, I've been feeling like as we've been, on this path of expansion, that we almost have to revisit things like the Lyran Wars and the Orion Wars and where the infiltrations first happen in the higher dimensional energies. for us to really get ourselves back, kind of like if we're trying to recover from a difficult childhood, we're going to have to face some of those things. Doesn't mean, we have to stay stuck in it or try and solve it to the point of it really bringing us down. But it's not easy energy to be moving into because in a sense, we are rebuilding the architecture of our soul matrix and our multidimensional body and our DNA. But we have to revisit certain things in order to call that power back. So we might have to revisit the Lucifer rebellions. And that's not to freak people out like, let's make it all about Lucifer or that figure. And I talk about this in my talks. It's really about, how can we align our egos with our spiritual light instead of the false light of, material, status stuff and just things that aren't spiritually based. It doesn't mean there's anything wrong with ego or having material things. It's just the right alignment allows us to use our power wisely and helps us to have a balance between the spiritual and material so that, we're actually shifting the planet and raising the vibration. And, anyway, so there's a lot to revisit. And I would say, September 23rd, I haven't been one of those people that have been feeling the comfortableness of it all. It's been incredibly uncomfortable. But I think we're going to find in October and up until, even March of next year, I see this as being a big window period where, we're going to shed that like a snake, we're going to shed that skin of the past, of our own incarnation here and some of the patterns that we have to deal with and how that, relates to, our deeper soul identity, perhaps. I mean, without it having to be a name or a label. But, a lot of people are like, oh, I'm Pleiadian or I'm Syrian or I'm this, I'm that. And it's like, okay, well, it's good to identify with things that are beyond what we've been taught in this human experience because it helps us to really awaken those cellular memories. But at the same time, there's a lot of people that have bounced around from different star systems to star systems. And there's a lot that we carry. We've had, either thousands of lives on Earth or off planet. I mean, once you're a soul, you're on a journey, and energy can't be created or destroyed. And so we've been around for quite a while and there's a lot to, look at. But yeah, the waves are really about, to me, rebirthing, but not like how people have said it before. Oh, we're birthing a new Earth. I mean, we are and we aren't. We're kind of returning to something very familiar, but we're taking it to the next level. And we're expanding into our multidimensional body. And our experience will reflect back to us a more multidimensional experience when we do that. To me, the ascension in this whole process is an inner shift. It's not something that's just going to be handed to us. We have to do the work, or else we're not going to reflect anything but the stuff that's stuck.
For sure. That is, I love the way that you said that because I always try to explain it too is energy can't be created or destroyed. So we're on this path. And you talked a lot about shedding and coming back. And I know you're not all about the titles, but you've talked a lot about this past life and how they found you through a lineage. And I've been personally having a lot of transmissions and downloads from Mary Magdalene. And I've read somewhere that might be your middle name and that you have this connection to her. Would you like to talk about that for that minute?
You just gave me the goosebumps.
Yeah, it's been that kind of week for me too.
I almost forget these things. I'm like, oh yeah, like, cause being human's difficult. I mean, we identify with maybe some of the projections of our past or the way we were raised. If we weren't, taught to be very empowered because we were too weird for our parents. I mean, that's some of the stuff that we're shedding so that we can emerge out of all this. My father did name, me as a middle name, Madeline, spelled the French way. And then I joined Facebook and I was like, well, I don't know what last name to use. So I was like, well, Laura Magdalene. I'll just leave it at that. But I had no idea that people were going to start liking my stuff. I didn't know I was going to be a public person. So I'm like, okay, I'll just keep that. And I'm like, okay, well, I'm ready to talk about ET government treaties. And Eisenhower's a part of my legal name. It's on my mother's side, but she raised me and, the biological, the last name I was born with, my birth name is Laura Magdalene Bradshaw. Then it got legally changed to Eisenhower because my mom raised me and that's her maiden name. And I think she's like, oh, that was the stupidest thing I ever did because now Laura's carrying the name Eisenhower. And I could have done it since the age of 11, but I didn't want anybody to treat me differently and I didn't want anybody to really know, but it didn't make sense for me to carry my father's last name anymore. He became a priest, we'll just say. Which is truth. And the marriage got annulled. So I've always not really known what name to take. And so anyway, it's Laura Magdalene Eisenhower because Eisenhower is a part of my legal name. And I recovered Madeline, which they legally dropped when they changed it to Laura Bratch Eisenhower. So, Mahan, which is my stepdad's last name. So it's a really complicated thing. And so I just said, this is the only thing that really resonates is this name. And the reason I was willing to use the last name Eisenhower was because I was ready to talk about stuff that needed attention, but it didn't make sense before that to draw attention to it. Magdalene, I've been ever since I was a little kid, it was just like, I just felt the oneness. It's like, I wouldn't say that it showed up as memories like, living the life of Christ or anything, or it being about an incarnation or having to, try and put myself in a place of identifying with it in that way. I have always seen it as a universal energy, and it's a part of our divine feminine inheritance. And I've always felt called to empower that within people or to help them to understand her true role or, what she was really about, because there's been a lot of distortions in history, of course. And I don't think people really understand what she, really represents beyond the life with Yeshua Christ. There's all these goddess archetypes connected, to Glastonbury and Avalon and, the triple goddess energies and all these things that have sort of been pulled away from her. And so I just felt always called to just sort of bring all those aspects back into wholeness. And so my journey has a lot to do with going into the underworld and going on the path of the labyrinth. It took me about 20 years, but it was a part of my service to Gaia and just what I felt called to do to help to empower the divine feminine on this planet. And a huge part of that is empowering this energy within people so that they can begin to recognize the true essence of the feminine, not all the programmings and conditionings and things that we learned growing up about what it means to be a woman. I've always rebelled against that. I didn't even feel like female at all because of it. I was a total tomboy. And I have to laugh that I have a huge page called Return of the Divine Feminine, because I was like anything but feeling like very feminine. But I'm like, okay, to me, this is about connecting to the earth. To me, it's about connecting to the essence of spirit and, alchemy and birthing and all these things that, men carry too, because they have female energy. So it's not about, really empowering the female gender. It's about empowering the divine masculine and feminine in union, but, giving a little bit extra attention to the feminine because of all the distortions, which have messed with men too. Men need a lot of healing as well because of the ego traps of, how they've been taught, to run their energy. And how men and women sort of feed these programmings, and both are responsible. We all have to do whatever clearing we have to do. It's not like, oh, the men have done this and it's all about the women. Not even close. It's about us understanding the feminine and masculine that exists within us and recognizing their energies as a dance, not a power struggle, and committing to that, relationship within so that we can create that relationship on the outer, and heal amongst each other. Knowing that, hey, if we're all in the same room together, we're committed to, working on all this. And that's what I, try and inspire people to think about when I do my presentations. But yeah, Magdalene, Sophia energies have always been strong. The whole Venus archetype, which relates to going into the underworld and back out again. I was, writing a book about a lot of that, of my journey. And then I realized, books have been written about this sort of path. I'm like, oh my gosh. This is really a real path of, dying and being reborn, which is the path of the labyrinth. It's a lot slower than like the whole concept of death and resurrection in the way that we, maybe saw like these stories of mythology or the Christ story. And it just has to do with, really unwinding from the matrix and being rebirthed, on your, living your life authentically and on your own terms, and so being in the Eisenhower family and having the strong Magdalene connection, I was like, okay, well, the part of my existence where maybe there's expectations in the family or maybe, just in society in general, I'm going to have to die and be reborn because there's no way in hell. There's no way in hell I'm going to go down a path that isn't true to who I am. But I had to break timelines. I had to break, I had to do all this sort of stuff. And most of the time I felt like I was dying. It was horrible. There's all sorts of energies that did not want me to do this. And so I think a lot of people can relate because being on a path of awakening or being on a spiritual path isn't necessarily easy. It's not just about meditating. I mean, we have to move through frequency fences in our DNA. We have to expand into territory that we've kind of grown a little bit distance from, like almost like it's a stranger, you know, but then when we get in touch with it, it's like the most familiar and natural thing ever. We just have to push the envelope and get out of the trappings. And it's either new age deceptions, it's either religion, it's either government. And we really just got to fall back on ourselves and say, you know what, me being authentic is the true spiritual path. And if people don't agree with it, it doesn't matter. You know, it's not for other people to have to agree with. You know, the best we can do is just have integrity and do the best we can with the path that we're on and share that with others. And that should be, you know, what community is based on. If we try and get people to think a certain way, and I do this with my talks, I'm not here to create fixed beliefs, but I'm here to trigger, you know, the free thinking mind to you know, see what resonates and then discard whatever doesn't. Yeah, because we don't want to create the same model. We don't want to create the same model all over again with different terminologies, or else it's really kind of hypocritical.
For sure. I love all of the things you had to say about the different energies, and it just feels like you could inform so many people and just go on that topic for a while. We're actually working on a segment show about the divine feminine masculine. We would love to have a chance to connect with you a little bit deeper on that. I know we have some questions from the audience we have to touch on, but anytime you want to share any of this information, our audience is willing to listen and is super excited about everything you have to say and everything that you stand for. So,
that's
really
so great.
Grateful for it.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for agreeing to do this. And you know, we do have questions from the audience. It's about halfway through the show now, so I guess we'll get to the questions from the audience. So thank you everybody for sending in your questions, and I guess we'll go back to ETs. This one is from Dave. He said, "Do the aliens or extraterrestrials hide behind the moon or the sun when they approach Earth?"
Hide behind the moon or the sun when they approach Earth? I mean, that's a good question. I mean, there's definitely activity on the moon. Moon and Mars have bases, alien bases. The moon doesn't. I mean, the moon just kind of, it doesn't turn. There's the dark side of the moon. And people are getting more and more aware and conscious of the fact that we're dealing with an artificial element to the moon. It's like a satellite, and a lot of the lunar energies, are used to mind control I think women feel it especially. I mean, because we're women and the moon energy is a very feminine thing. And men feel this too. But like, the energies are pretty freaking awful a lot of the time, where it's hard to be emotionally balanced. It's hard not to feel, you know, pulled by these energies in a way that doesn't really feel right. And, you know, it's almost like when you see, it's like having an ant problem or like rats in your house. You know, the moon is just with these entities and beings that, you know, are trying to control the emotional body of the feminine and to keep it, you know, exiled or in a level of imbalance. And so I would say there is a lot of ET activity going on that isn't exactly positive. And when we're dealing with the grays, more than likely, most of them are either future humanoids or they have been, you know, cloned, and because the timelines that they chose to go down actually broke down their reproductive abilities and broke down, like, they digress, but they also advance themselves intellectually. So we see, you know, the big-headed ET, but the emotional body and the soul energy and its ability to reproduce, you know, ended up declining on these timelines. And so they rely on us for food. And so these bases and where the ETs are, whether they're approaching the Earth or staying put, is to maintain some level of control because of the choices that they've made. And this is why it's such a powerful window period right now, because, you know, we can choose to be on a path of becoming like an ascended master, or getting back to, you know, upgrading our DNA, getting back to sort of that higher benevolent ET, you know, those abilities, you know, where we might return to what we once were on a DNA level, or we can digress and become grays. And so the Mars moon thing, there's some bases for sure. But it's been said too that a lot of those beings have been cleared. And in this window period that we're in, it's a big time of purification. And so, people say as above, so below. I also say as below, so above. What we choose to change amongst each other also changes the nature of who we're interacting with and how we're interacting with them. And so if we clean house and we do our inner work, we're not going to really be able to exist in a vibration of control. And that actually puts us in a much more positive timeline. That's what the organic ascension timeline is all about. But there's artificial timelines and technologies used to siphon our energies and to throw us on a different path. And a lot of the beings actually, like I said, digressed, but intellectually became more advanced, with the use of technology and the focus on, more science and technology type stuff. And so exposing the Mars agenda and exposing a lot of the exopolitical stuff is also just a plea to humanity saying, we don't have to go down this path. We don't need to be vulnerable on the surface of the earth and put up with an NWO, New World Order scenario. If we simply pull our attention off of the governments and stop voting these people into office is number one. Maybe, we could start there. And then the other agendas, where most of those beings decided to go along with it out of fear or because they were talked into it or they thought it was a good idea. This is our chance to get things right because, we have future human selves out there. For some, it might be an ascended master energy. For others, it might be a gray ET that's coming to get their genetic material in order to keep their life cycle alive. Because once you choose to cut yourself off from source or spirit, you're no longer on a path of ascension. That's why they use technology, and that's why there's transhumanism and all these different things to replace our life force and to replace our spiritual abilities so that we're locked into this sort of transhumanism technological matrix that can keep people alive. There's artificial immortality type stuff, but they're using us as the free energy to fuel those technologies. I mean, they wouldn't be able to use those technologies if they weren't taking energy from us because we're the free energy technology they want as humans in these advanced human vessels. As long as we stay foreign to what our human vessel is capable of, then we're very vulnerable to having our energy stolen and taken. And they take our DNA too and they screw with it. So, we really just have to take a stand. And that's just like taking a stand to anybody who's deceptive in your life. You just say no and you walk the other way.
Yeah, it's absolutely brilliant. And, throughout this, ascension plan or organic ascension as it's called, I've definitely had a lot of bipolar energies where I felt like I'm so great, like life is amazing, I feel so great, and then like in an instant I'm like, F this is so, why am I even here? And it's really interesting. I did want to touch on the grays, and somebody sent in a question, something similar to that. But I definitely feel that ascension because, we're interviewing Laura Eisenhower for God's sake. And this one's for, what's that?
Things are happening.
Yeah, things are happening. So, this one's for Mike. He said, he wants to know, did Dwight D. Eisenhower make a deal with the ETs? And this is something that, I personally am connected with because I have had an abduction experience with the Greys, and I've had dreams where they were talking to me and doing their little clicky noises. It's very interesting. Someone messaged me about it, and he said that he heard that Dwight D. Eisenhower made a deal with the Greys that they were able to abduct a certain amount of people, but that the Greys started going way overboard, and President Eisenhower wasn't able to control it. Is that something that you know anything about?
Oh, yeah, I talk about it all the time. I mean, back when I was hearing those rumors, I was like, okay, let's get to the bottom of this. Let's put it out there, even if it makes him look bad. I kind of joke. I'm like, I didn't come out of my mom's womb waving the I like Ike flag. I'm here for deeper reasons. It's all about truth to me. So if this needs to be exposed, I'm going to talk about it. And so I did a massive amount of research on ET government treaties, so much. And I ended up threading the most common thing that different researchers were saying. And I, have put it in articles. I've put it in presentations. And the treaties actually started to happen during the Second World War. And they actually approached Roosevelt. They approached Hitler. I mean, there's all sorts of activity going on way back when. And when Truman authorized Project Paperclip and the 3-letter organizations were being set up before Eisenhower became president, it's like he fell right into the trap. I mean, just becoming president alone. He actually didn't want to be president. My grandfather, his son, who transitioned last year, said that he didn't really want to become president. He was really pushed into it by like some of the Illuminati people, actually, but he didn't really realize who they were at the time because everything is very compartmentalized, or, you know, things are done on the surface, and you have to have certain security clearances to know what's really going on. And if you don't have that, you don't really know what's going on, and you're just fed sort of the outer facade. But he was onto them, and he actually wrote something and put it in the walls of the Gettysburg farm where he used to live, and not to be open until 2050. And it's really about what really went down. And I have a really hard time every time I go to the Gettysburg farm not taking out the sledgehammer, but you know, like, where is it? I want to read it. And I'm like, 2050, like, oh my God, I'm going to be, anyway, hopefully, not too rickety. But by the time he stepped into office, the 3-letter organizations had already, really, you know, infiltrated, the U.S. I mean, Project Paperclip brought over all the Nazi scientists, and Truman didn't even know that he was doing that because they cleared all the history of, these people, and what he was authorizing was not what he thought. And then we go into Montauk and, you know, the technologies of time travel and teleportation and all sorts of things that, you know, also, herald the beginning of the chemtrail weather modification agendas. And, when the Greys approached them, most whistleblowers in Eisenhower administration, first of all, the Nordics supposedly came first. And at the end of this war, you know, they needed to deliberate and really talk about it because they just got out of this big war, and the Nordics were saying, you know, get rid of all the weapons and this and that. And they hadn't made a decision. You know, whistleblowers have said that Eisenhower wanted to side with the Nordics, but he's dealing with, you know, advisors, joint chiefs of staff. He's dealing with all these things, and it's not just him. And then the Greys approached before they made a decision about the Nordics. And at this point, what at least 3 or 4 whistleblowers have said is that it was more of a surrender. It wasn't really a treaty. And they really didn't have any choice because of the weapons, or because of, you know, the telepathy or the powers of these beings and what they were. I don't know. It's really complicated. People can check out an article I wrote about it in great detail on my website, cosmicgaiasophia.com. You'll see a transcript about, you know, ET government treaties. It's a talk I did in Italy. It's based on that. I presented in front of the Italian press. They had me come to talk about the treaties. And there's so much more to it than people realize. You know, he didn't sell us out. He didn't, I mean, abductions, happened starting actually with Winston Churchill, Aleister Crowley, and Hitler were the ones that first, allowed abductions to happen. And it was particularly Churchill, actually. And you never hear about this. People don't hear about it. And I have a lot of information about this. You know, if people want to know my sources and where I get the information, I can send them some of these articles. And the person that I get it from, Lisa Renee, energeticsynthesis.com, is one of the most phenomenal beings out there. She's like a walk-in. She's Syrian. And all her stuff is just right on. She talks about the negative ET agenda, but she talks about, you know, Christ Sophia and Gaia. And, you know, I've never met anybody that really covers all these sort of bases in a similar way that I do, but puts it in such technical terms. So the abductions actually originated with Churchill, and it got out of control during that time, is what she says. And Eisenhower, you know, when he came in, it's like there was a lot of defense-related programs like DARPA that he helped start, and things that ended up getting infiltrated. And so when we look at the Mars agenda, there was a time where there was some sense to it. But when you're dealing with time traveling Nazis and advanced technologies and off-planet races that have been manipulating humans for thousands of years, you as a president, or a person who's just being president, it doesn't have, you know, as much power and control as one might, you know, think. And the ones that are public and the ones that we hear about are usually the scapegoats, or are usually the ones that are being used. The ones that are really up to no good. I mean, as much as we know the famous names of like the Bilderberg group and the, like Kissinger and like all these other people, most of those people actually have connection to mind control technologies that create secret assassins, sex slaves, to do all their dirty work. I mean, there's projects and things going on that are so sick and disturbing that, Eisenhower and the ET treaties looks like, nothing compared to what's been going on a much, much deeper level. And he tried to turn all this around. He had 8 heart attacks. He had a really hard time handling the threats, the secrecy. He tried to invade Area 51. If anybody wants to Google or search on YouTube an interview between Richard Dolan and somebody named Anonymous, I was actually supposed to join them on that interview. Anonymous is basically on his deathbed, and he's talking about how Eisenhower was going to invade Area 51 and how when he realized, the alien technology and whose hands it was in and that he had no real say or control over it, he went nuts. He really went nuts. And so if people watch that video, they'll get a sense of, here's somebody on their deathbed who's willing, to tell the truth. He couldn't really do it before. Yeah. But Eisenhower's always been on our side from what I've understood. I used to share a lot more difficult truths that I thought were basically like, okay, yeah, he did sign us over to the Greys. And upon further research, I'm like, wait a second, that's not exactly how it happened at all. So it was a very refreshing and a big revelation for me, but I was willing to share whatever. I just wanted to get the truth out, but there's layer upon layer upon layer is all I can really say.
Wow, it's an incredible story. I'm glad that you talked about that. And I got to see that interview that they did with the Anonymous, and that was, I think, a few years ago that I saw it. And I remember him, there was a question like, why are you saying it now? And he's like, well, I'm on my deathbed and I don't want to die with this knowledge. I want to tell people so they can, find the truth finally. So thank you for sharing that. We'll go to the next question. We have about 3 or 4 more questions that we'd like to get to. And, we have about 15 more minutes. I want to respect your time and really appreciate what you're doing here for us. I guess this one will go with Taylor Doll. And Taylor asks, what was your shift like? Your shift from being asleep to awake, if you understand those terms.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to sound like I'm, like overly confident with this, but I've been pretty darn awake from the get-go, trying to share this sort of information, not so much about the ET stuff. I was very aware of extraterrestrials. I had an interesting contact experience when I was a kid. And I always was, talking to Eisenhower, and psychics have confirmed that he was a spirit guide, or he is a spirit guide. I walked into a clairvoyant institute one time. I was living in Santa Rosa, and they were just putting on like this psychic fair, and I just stumbled in there and I was like, okay, well, I'll check this out. And one of the psychics said, Eisenhower's here. And I was like, well, I should probably go up to this person and tell them I'm related. And they're like, yeah, well, he's with you all the time. He's like a guide and, kind of, on a very human level, he's still interacting a lot with the human race. He still does all sorts of things on our behalf, but not obviously in physical form. And I've had a lot of confirmation throughout the years. I went to a clairvoyant institute, so I ended up staying there because I'm like, oh my God, if they could see that, then, and I know I'm pretty clairvoyant and I've been using tarot for the last 20 something years. Maybe it would benefit me to, hone those abilities, because we all have those abilities. We just have to work with them. But yeah, I've always been aware of my mission since I was a little kid. I've always been talking to, either the spirit of Eisenhower. I thought, maybe it was my imagination until people were picking up on it. And the Christ energy, believe it or not. Mm-hmm. And the Magdalene, Sophia energies have always been, and I've always known there was programmings. I always knew that everything was really out of whack. And I was really awake to a lot, but I was shocked at how much is actually going on behind the scenes. So if that part is awakening, how have I adjusted? Well, I'm probably very similar to a lot of people where at first you're really pissed off, at a lot of it. And, when I look at chemtrails or what, things that are going on with nature, my background's in wilderness expedition leadership. And so, just the sanctuary of nature being so affected and so, mistreated and, just them attempting to control weather and all the poisoning of the elements makes me freaking insane. And then I just sort of had a breakthrough. And I would say that this was the moment of awakening for me because I've always, had my eye on the power structures and the hidden layers. Always, because I knew something was way off. But like I said, once I discovered how off it really was and the nature of a lot of the mind control projects, it just was so disturbing. And so I, ended up just meeting people that have been breaking free of these projects, helping them to have, I'm working to help them to get more of their information out there. Because the thing is, if there's a scandal or something, like Monica Lewinsky or Bill Clinton, it's usually covering up something that somebody's putting out there that needs to be seen, particularly during the time of all that. Hillary Clinton was up to no good and has been. Kathy O'Brien wrote a book about it and the torture she endured under Hillary Clinton. So that kind of stuff's always been disturbing. But now I think the great awakening for me has been turn the weapons that they're throwing at us into something that serves you. So when I look at chemtrails, I let it empower me. I'm like, thanks for reminding me of how powerful we are and how much you're trying to put a stop to us because you can't. And that's sort of the energy that I hold instead of anger and bitterment and, oh, we're doomed and look what's happening to this world, because I know we're on a multidimensional planet and this particular density that we're in is allowing us to learn from duality and good and evil, and that's a part of us rehabilitating our DNA, back to the 12 tree of life. We've been in this sort of dumbed down version, but it's given us the chance to understand the right use of power and how to use our free will. So if we're going to observe things that are disturbing, let's have it serve us and empower us rather than crush us, because this is only one part of the larger experience. And so I would say that those sort of revelations have been on and off throughout my life, and it's tempered or at least helped soften the absolute rage I feel and bitterness and resentment to, those that are screwing over the human race and who know better or who are too scared to step up to the plate and do something good for humanity. And that's why it's just like, hey, maybe I'm a bit of a masochist and I'm willing to take a bullet, but like, I'm not going to sit and witness this. I'm going to get out there. I'm going to share this stuff, and whatever happens to me because of it, so be it. But, there's great protection in walking this sort of path, but I want to be an example. I'm not going to just share bad news and like, oh, look at what they're doing to us. I'm not into the us and them thing. I'm into, let's look at ourselves, what we need to clear, what we need to unplug from, and let's get it right. And let's be the example, and let's spread that energy, and let's be alchemists here.
Love it. Awesome. That is awesome.
That is awesome. And I think that's a great segue into the next question. This one is from Brenda. And she says, how do we stop greed from destroying all of nature?
Well, I mean, we can only really control ourselves. We can't control anybody else. They're trying to control us. And it's like, we don't use their tactics to try and turn them around. We don't have assassination programs to off, the horrible, leaders out there. We don't have anything we can spray in the sky to wake them up, essential oils or LSD. I don't know.
Spray essential oils all over there. That's so, I love that. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, we don't have, and I wouldn't do the LSD. I was joking. I mean, just something, maybe like ayahuasca, something that would, a little bit more gentle than, plant teacher medicine type stuff. But the whole deal is that, we might seem like we're at a disadvantage because we don't have the advanced technologies. We don't have, certain things to be able to fully counteract what they're doing to nature and humanity. I mean, it's really a one person at a time deal. You really function like an organism. So in our bodies, if we're battling some sort of disease, it's not going to help us to be in the battle. It's going to help us to, change our diet, change our belief systems, and work with what's already there and what's available, but it's going to require a commitment to us, or else we're not going to get very far. And so, once we reach a certain number of beings, which I think we've already done, that have awakened, the more unity consciousness we create by doing the inner work and being authentic, because we can't really unify if we're carrying programmings and ancestral patterns. We're just creating the same dilemma over and over again. I mean, once we do all that, there's a certain point where, nature and the energy that we all share together creates the backlash, creates a healing response. It might start off as a healing crisis, when we're detoxing and stuff, you feel kind of sick and like the body's just getting rid of all this crap. I see the same thing on the planet where if enough of us unite and if enough of us do the inner work and connect with, what we need to to assist Gaia because, the elements respond to us. If we clear our own inner elements, if we purify our waters, if we take care of our physical vessel, if we have the right use of power, and use the fire energy, for passion instead of just anger and rage, and we align it with what we're really passionate about, and we clear, our thought forms, the earth has no choice but to respond to that. And that's how we clean up the elements in the planet, by understanding that we're made of earth, air, fire, water. And the alchemy comes from staying connected to spirit and understanding that spirit holds dominion over physical matter. And we're in this whole window period that we're in right now is us, stepping up to the plate. The Venus transits, which the Mayans understood, draw a perfect pentagram in the sky and a sacred geometry of a rose. And so it's not about what we need to attain or what we need to do or who we need to take down. Although I do believe, and I do live this myself, that we need to be on a path of creating justice and holding people accountable and exposing all this stuff. But to me, the real work comes from recognizing what's already happening, getting out of the way of ourselves and allowing ourselves to be receivers of this great energy, because, our human vessel is a house for spirit. And we've allowed ourselves to be programmed and we've let matter and physicality rule. But, that was also because the planet was not in alignment with the galactic plane. So it was very easy in our history to be really oppressed or ruled by these lower energies. Now we're in alignment with the galactic plane, and we're in this natural alchemy connected to Venus, the planet, which connects to our heart chakra, which is the bridge between heaven and earth. And we're wanting to go to the 7 higher heavens, though, and our galactic chakras. We have to understand that this is already happening and that the cosmos is doing this. But if we're not receiving it and if we're not open vessels for it, then we, in a sense, block it. And it's not that we're channeling. I mean, it's our higher self. It's cosmos. It's earth. It's what's happening. We have an affinity to it in our chakra systems and in our DNA. So it is us. And that's where the oneness is. To me, oneness is diversity and harmony. The more authentic we are, the more we embrace our own uniqueness with the common thread of, connecting in spiritual oneness without, dogma, without, trying to control the way people think and do things. Everything's going to fall into place, just like the ecosystems in the web of life. Every animal is diverse. It knows its job. It knows what it's here to do, but it all functions as a whole. And you pull one thing out, it's going to affect everybody. So if we pull one person's purpose away from them or their authenticity away from them, then that's a weak point. And because millions of people are asleep, something else is running the show, because that's what possession is. If you're not possessing your power, if you're not empowered, if you're not in your body, if you're not fully being all that you are, something else is going to jump in and do it for you. And that's where the negative energies come in. And nature teaches us, how to remember our own truth. And what that really is not a belief system. It's us feeling like we can be ourselves. We can be comfortable in our own skin. We can share what's on our mind without any fear of what people will do or say, because we don't have to keep those people around that don't get us, anyway, so I hope I'm not going way off on a tangent.
No, it's all very useful and really great information. And I feel like it's a good way to almost end the podcast too, with like, this is how it can be done. You got to start with you. And there is things we can do, but there's nothing we can do to change everybody. It's all about changing yourself within to make the difference and show others how it's done rather than trying to make them do it.
Yeah, we actually had a few more questions. Unfortunately, I think we're running out of time, so we'll have to get to those. Perhaps maybe if you're interested in another interview. I did want to say that, Laura Snow wanted to know about your Mars mission, but I think you answered that like right at the very beginning of the podcast. So you sort of intuitively answered Laura's question. I just wanted to give her a shout out because she was really excited and wanted to connect with you. So I just wanted to say that and say hello to her. I guess now is time for any shameless plugs that you had. How can people find you and all that good stuff?
Well, you can find me on Facebook, Laura Magdalene Eisenhower, and follow me there. I just post a lot of stuff about just everything, whatever's on my mind too. Sometimes I'm shocked. I'm like, did I really write that?
Channeling
it. And what's that?
I said, you're just channeling what needs to be said.
Right. I hope so. And my website's Cosmic Gaia Sophia.com. And you can just Google my name and my website comes up pretty right away in the search bar. Yeah, so my website, talks about the different events I'm doing. There's a readings link if you want to find out about the session work that I do. And, and also consultations, and everything's pretty much there. So yeah, check out my website, and then my Facebook page, keeps the flow going. I post a lot there, so.
That's awesome. Yeah, thanks for sharing that you do the consultations and the tarot. I would love to hear more about that, because those are all things that I'm interested in as well. And it's been beautiful just hearing more of your story and getting to connect outside of a festival scene and to communicate with you in such a way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely.
Well, I thank you so much for having me. I love your questions and what you guys are doing. Thank you so much for, just doing what you do and just giving people like me a voice and others, and really appreciate you both.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. So can you stay on for just a moment after we go to break?
Sure.
Okay, great. So we're going to take a short break, and then when we come back, we're going to do the card reading and meditation.
That'd be awesome.
All right, so stay tuned. Thank you, everybody.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Season 3 of Project Bermuda Life podcast. It's Fantastic Shine here with this week's card reading. I'm excited to be doing a card reading for you all. It's been a couple of weeks. And this week I've decided to use my Earth Magic Oracle cards by Stephen Farmer. So the first card we have today is the Green Man, and it stands for synergy. The Green Man is Earth's vegetation, personified. Although he has many variations, this card depicts a more subtle and embedded representation. And in other portrayals, he resembles the face of a man covered in green foliage as branches and veins sprout from every direction. There exists some form of the Green Man throughout history and is in a variety of cultures throughout the world. Often, he is a symbol for rebirth of life in the springtime, and he's also associated with the Lord of the Wildwood. So he's a really awesome character to have showing up right now. He's also a representation of the plant kingdom. He reminds us of the incredible synergy required for Mother Earth to maintain her delicate and dynamic balance among the various beings on the planet. Synergy is the interaction and cooperation of two or more elements that produce a combined effect greater than the sum of their separate efforts. We witness this in the complex and the cooperative interaction between plants and humans and animals. For instance, different groups that can really get along if they sit down and they try to work together. It's interesting on what people can accomplish if they give up this idea of it having to be their project or their anything. And I know I've personally been having some problems with this recently, and so have some of the people I've been interacting with. All of our egos are kind of trying to claim these ideas when really we need to be working in synergy. So as new plants grow, the bees pollinate the flowers, and then the cycle can begin again in nature's simple yet remarkable synergy. So the synergy card showed first, followed by the dragonfly card, which represents emergence. In the stages of the life cycle of a dragonfly, once the egg is laid upon a floating plant or dropped into the water, it then it grows and then hatches, and it may remain for up to 4 or 5 years in a larva state called a nymph. After that, it then turns into a dragonfly, and it kind of skips the cocoon stage, moving straight from the egg to the nymph. At some point, the nymph decides to climb onto a rock or a leaf, and then there emerges from its former body and takes on the shape and the character of what we know as an adult dragonfly. This radiant being then proceeds to illuminate our eyes and hearts as we just witness its dramatic colors and magical dance among the surface of the water. Dragonflies are beautiful creatures, and in this card we see a nature goddess like the dragonfly emerging from the water. Her hair is all braided with the vines, dotted with flowers, and she's surrounded by dragonflies. And it is just one of the most vibrant plant life thriving cards. Both of them are in this deck, or this spread. We have two just growing and healthy environments. And the goddess is really emerging from her place in the water as a transformed being with this sense of power and purpose just emerging. And right now you may be in an intense process of emerging into the next cycle of your life. So many of us are just trying to figure out what the next step is, what the next chapter really holds. Unlike more gradual shifts in awareness, right now we're all experiencing this huge shift. Going into the winter season, a lot of people are having some unexpected changes, and there's really no pause or time for contemplation or decision making. You just have to go with it. And you may even think that you're unprepared for such a dramatic change right now, but always remember that everything happens for a reason, and you're going to get through it. You have friends and family, and you can use these experiences and wisdom to really move through this next chapter. Life is demanding that we move, and it's requiring us to adjust our thinking about ourselves and others and people we worked with and people we will work with, and it's calling for you to shed yet another layer of our ego and our defenses to really embrace the new. It's being broadened right now because it's a collective consciousness shift. It's not just one or two people, it's everybody is being required to make this shift. Which leads us to our last card, which is the eagle, and it represents communion. Here, the man and the eagle make contact through their eyes and spirit, and the man has performed a ceremonial calling to the eagle brother, who now comes to him as a familiar friend. With this intimate relationship between human being and feathered being, both spirit and flesh come together, and it's ultimately one of the deepest spiritual kinships that can connect them. Whenever you experience a heartfelt communion with some physical expression of life, plant, animal, human, or anything else, it's only then that you can really feel how your life force is similar to the life force of all that's around you. It's only a matter of differences in form, and essence is really articulated into the physical world in a multitude of ways that is the same in everything and everyone. And although it manifests in various shapes, sizes, and characteristics, the essence of spirit is really just emanating through all that is. And it's really important for you to make that connection with nature right now, before the winter really just keeps us inside and we don't have that chance. Relax your body as much as possible and just enjoy yourself. Breathe consciously and keep your attention on the life form that you are communicating with. After a few moments of just experiencing what's around you, you'll notice a sense of the boundaries dissolving, a melding of the I and the thou, and you may even receive messages or impressions as you find yourself in the flow of unspoken communication. So all in all, this reading is just telling you to get in touch with whatever it is that's surrounding you at this time, especially if there's some nature spot that's calling you before the winter months keep you from it, or an animal that has been coming to you a lot. It's time for you to take some time and focus on that. So I really hope you've appreciated this reading. I hope it's helped you in some way. And thanks again for tuning into Project Bring Me to Life. Stay awake and shine on always.
Hello, and welcome to another 2-minute meditation. For this 2-minute meditation, we are going to receive. So sit back, relax, and close your eyes. This time is very important to receive energy, especially with the wave of love coming. The wave is also called Wave X by some people. So close your eyes and just listen to the music, and you will receive the energy that you need to go through this wave at an easy, smooth pace. begin to wiggle your toes and wiggle your fingers. It's time to come back. Thank you all for taking part in this 2-minute meditation. Find more at csclawson.wordpress.com. Thanks, and have a great week.